In 1891, in the coastal town of Whitby, Yorkshire, the Victorian belief that children's drawings were innocent expressions of imagination was shattered by an 8-year-old girl who sketched her own death with perfect accuracy 6 months before it occurred. What happened to Elizabeth Crane would challenge medical understanding, terrify a community, and create documentation so unsettling it remained sealed in the Royal College of Physicians archives for 93 years. This is the story documented in the Crane medical file at the Wellcome Library, witnessed by 37 people, classified until 1984. A story about a child who saw the future in images she could not possibly understand and drew every detail of her final moments. Elizabeth Mary Crane was born on December 3, 1882, the youngest daughter of Thomas Crane, a shipwright at Whitby's bustling harbor, and his wife Margaret, who had died of pneumonia when Elizabeth was only 4. In the 4 years since losing her mother, Elizabeth had been raised by her elder sister, Sarah, who was 19 and had sacrificed her own prospects of marriage to care for her younger siblings, Elizabeth and their brother William, aged 12. Those who knew Elizabeth described a quiet, thoughtful child with auburn curls and hazel eyes that seemed older than her years. She possessed an unusual talent for drawing, spending hours sketching the harbor, the abbey ruins, and the fishing boats that dotted Whitby's waters. Her schoolteacher, Miss Agnes Whitmore, had preserved several of Elizabeth's drawings, noting the child's remarkable attention to detail and mature understanding of perspective. Elizabeth attended St. Mary's Parish School, helped Sarah with household duties each afternoon, and spent her evenings drawing by candlelight at the kitchen table. Her father, still grieving his wife's death, found solace in his youngest daughter's quiet presence. Sarah would later testify that Elizabeth was the gentlest soul I ever knew, incapable of deceit or morbid fancy, a child who drew beauty from the world around her. On the morning of March 17, 1891, Elizabeth woke at dawn as usual, helped Sarah prepare breakfast porridge, and walked with William to St. Mary's School through streets still damp from overnight rain. Her slate and drawing materials were carefully wrapped in oilcloth, protected from the moisture that clung to Whitby's cobblestones. Miss Whitmore's attendance register recorded Elizabeth's arrival at 8:47 a.m. The morning lessons proceeded normally. Arithmetic, followed by reading from the Gospel of Matthew. At 10:30 a.m., Miss Whitmore distributed drawing paper for the weekly art lesson, asking students to sketch spring flowers from specimens she had brought from her garden. Elizabeth sat by the window overlooking the harbor, her usual seat, and began to draw. But instead of reaching for the daffodils on Miss Whitmore's desk, she stared out at the gray water with an expression Sarah would later describe as distant, as if seeing something none of us could see. At precisely 10:47 a.m., Elizabeth began drawing something that would change everything. Elizabeth's pencil moved across the paper with unusual speed and precision. Miss Whitmore, circulating among her students, approached Elizabeth's desk and stopped abruptly. The child was not drawing flowers. Instead, her paper showed a detailed sketch of Whitby Harbor in what appeared to be autumn, with leaves scattered across the cobblestones, and a specific fishing boat, the Mary Catherine, tied at the eastern dock. "Elizabeth, dear, you're meant to draw the daffodils," Miss Whitmore said gently. Elizabeth did not respond. Her eyes remained fixed on the paper, her hand moving with mechanical precision. She began adding details. A crowd of people gathered on the dock, their faces turned toward the water. A girl in a dark dress standing at the edge of the pier. Storm clouds gathering overhead. Miss Whitmore touched Elizabeth's shoulder. The child flinched, then looked up with eyes that seemed unfocused, pupils dilated despite the bright morning light. "I have to finish it," Elizabeth whispered. "I have to show what happens." She returned to her drawing, adding more elements with disturbing specificity. The girl at the pier's edge wore a distinctive checked dress. The date, September 23rd, appeared in careful letters at the bottom of the page. Most chillingly, Elizabeth drew the girl falling, her body tilted forward, arms outstretched, suspended above the dark water. The other students had stopped working, watching Elizabeth with growing unease. Miss Whitmore later testified. The child's face was pale as death itself. She drew with a fever I had never seen, as if compelled by some force beyond her control. When she finished, she set down her pencil, looked at the drawing, and began to weep. Elizabeth pushed the paper away from her, tears streaming down her face. "That's me," she said, pointing to the falling girl. "That's me in September. I'm wearing Sarah's old dress, the one with the checks. I'm at the harbor. I fall. I can't swim. I don't come back up." At 11:03 a.m., 16 minutes after she began drawing, Elizabeth fainted. Dr. Henry Blackwood, the school's attending physician educated at Edinburgh Medical School, examined Elizabeth within the hour. His medical journal, dated March 17, 1891, records his initial assessment. The patient exhibited symptoms consistent with nervous exhaustion following what appeared to be a dissociative episode. Pulse elevated, pupils dilated, skin cold and clammy. Most remarkable was the drawing itself, which I examined carefully. The level of detail was extraordinary for a child of 8. Accurate architectural features of the harbor, correct rigging on the fishing vessel, even the specific pattern of cobblestones at the eastern dock. The child had drawn a scene she claimed was her own. Death, dated precisely 6 months in the future. Sarah Crane, summoned from the family home, provided the most emotionally wrenching testimony in a letter to her aunt, dated March 19th. "When I arrived at the school, Elizabeth was conscious but deeply shaken. She kept saying, 'I saw it, Sarah. I saw myself die.' I held her and told her it was just a bad dream, but she insisted it was real, that she had seen it as clearly as she saw me standing before her. The drawing terrified me. The girl falling into the water wore my old checked dress, the one I had just altered to fit Elizabeth. She had not yet worn it. How could she know she would be wearing it in September?" Miss Agnes Whitmore, a rational woman skeptical of supernatural claims, testified before the Whitby Medical Society on March 25th. "I have taught children for 17 years. I have seen anxiety, imagination, even hysteria. This was different." Elizabeth drew with absolute certainty, as if copying an image only she could see. The detail was beyond her normal ability. The date was specific. The scene was precise. "I am a woman of reason, but I cannot explain what I witnessed." Dr. Blackwood conducted systematic examinations of Elizabeth over the following week, documenting his findings in 32 pages of detailed notes. He tested her artistic ability, asking her to draw various scenes from memory. Her normal drawings, while skilled for her age, showed none of the extraordinary detail present in the harbor sketch. On March 19th, Dr. Blackwood took Elizabeth to Whitby Harbor with her father and Sarah present. He asked her to identify the location she had drawn. Elizabeth walked directly to the eastern dock, stood at a specific point on the pier, and said quietly, "Here, this is where I'll be standing. The Mary Catherine will be tied there." She pointed to a mooring post. "It will be late afternoon. The tide will be high. I'll be alone because Sarah will be at the market." Dr. Blackwood noted that the Mary Catherine, the fishing boat depicted in Elizabeth's drawing, was indeed frequently moored at that location, though it was currently at sea. The vessel was owned by James Weatherby, a fisherman known to the Crane family. Most remarkably, on March 22nd, Dr. Blackwood conducted a knowledge test. He showed Elizabeth a calendar and asked her to describe what she saw for September 23, 1891. Without hesitation, she provided specific details. "It will rain in the morning. The afternoon will be clear but cold. There will be a funeral at St. Mary's Church at 2 o'clock. Mrs. Patterson from Church Street. Sarah will go to pay respects. Father and William will be working. I'll go to the harbor to draw the boats." Dr. Blackwood's journal entry that evening reveals his growing alarm. The child speaks of future events with the same certainty most people reserve for past memories. She does not speculate or guess. She states facts about a day 6 months hence as if she has already lived it. Most troubling is her calm acceptance of her own death. She shows no fear, only a quiet sadness, as if she has already grieved for herself. The critical, impossible detail came on March 24th. Elizabeth drew another picture, this time showing the interior of the Weatherby home, depicting Mrs. Weatherby's kitchen with specific details: a blue ceramic teapot on the shelf, a torn section of wallpaper behind the stove, a wooden chair with one broken spindle. The Crane family had never visited the Weatherby home. When Dr. Blackwood discreetly visited Mrs. Weatherby on March 26th, he found every detail exactly as Elizabeth had drawn it. Word spread through Whitby within days. The Whitby Gazette published a cautious account on March 28th, describing only a local child's remarkable premonition. Spiritualists from as far as York arrived, claiming Elizabeth possessed prophetic gifts. Skeptics suggested the child had overheard conversations or was seeking attention following her mother's death. The Anglican vicar, Reverend Thomas Morton, held a special prayer service, uncertain whether Elizabeth's visions were divine warning or demonic deception. By April 1st, 53 townspeople had visited the Crane home to see the drawings themselves. The harbor masters quietly noted the date September 23rd in their logs, wondering if tragedy could be prevented through vigilance. Dr. Jonathan Fairfax, senior physician at York County Hospital and specialist in disorders of the mind, arrived in Whitby on April 5th with explicit instructions to verify or debunk the Crane case. He brought with him 2 colleagues and equipment for comprehensive psychological and neurological assessment. Dr. Fairfax designed rigorous tests. On April 8th, he asked Elizabeth to draw additional future events, not related to her predicted death. She produced 3 drawings: a wedding at St. Mary's Church showing specific people in specific positions, dated May 12th, a fire at the rope works near the harbor, dated June 3rd, and a ship arriving in port flying a Norwegian flag, dated July 18th. On May 12th, the wedding of Thomas Hartley and Anne Pemberton took place at St. Mary's Church. 19 witnesses, including Dr. Fairfax, compared Elizabeth's drawing to the actual event. The positions of family members, the arrangement of flowers, even the tear in the bride's veil that occurred during the ceremony, all matched Elizabeth's drawing created 5 weeks earlier. On June 3rd, at approximately 3:30 p.m., a fire broke out at Whitby Rope Works. It began in the storage shed, exactly as Elizabeth had depicted. The fire was contained quickly, but the accuracy of her prediction was witnessed by 12 people who had seen her drawing. Most dramatically, on July 18th, the Norwegian merchant vessel Nordstjernen entered Whitby Harbor unannounced. Elizabeth had drawn the ship with specific details: its name on the hull, the configuration of its masts, even the red cap worn by its captain. Harbor Master William Stevenson, who had been shown Elizabeth's drawing in April, stood on the dock with 23 witnesses as the ship arrived, matching the drawing in every particular. Dr. Fairfax's official report, preserved in the York Medical Society archives, documented his findings. I arrived in Whitby determined to expose fraud or delusion. Instead, I have documented 3 separate verifiable predictions, each containing specific details that proved accurate. The child does not merely guess future events. She perceives them with visual clarity and renders them with artistic precision. The mechanism is unknown, but the phenomenon is genuine. Most troubling is her continued insistence that she will die on September 23rd. Given the accuracy of her other predictions, we must consider this a credible threat. Professor Edmund Harrington, Britain's foremost expert on precognition and a Fellow of the Society for Psychical Research, arrived in Whitby on July 25th. Educated at Cambridge and trained under pioneering psychologist William James in America, Professor Harrington had investigated 47 cases of alleged prophecy, debunking 43 as fraud or coincidence. He spent 2 weeks conducting intensive examinations of Elizabeth, employing the latest techniques in psychological assessment. His initial skepticism was profound. I came expecting to find a clever child and suggestible adults, he wrote to his colleague Frederick Myers on August 1st. What I found defies my expectations entirely. Professor Harrington's breakthrough came on August 7th. Under controlled conditions, with 12 witnesses present, he asked Elizabeth to enter a relaxed state and describe what she saw. She spoke calmly. "I see things that haven't happened yet. Not all things, just some things, important things, sad things. I don't choose what I see. The pictures come to me, usually when I'm drawing. It's like remembering something that hasn't happened yet." Professor Harrington discovered something that elevated the mystery to new levels of strangeness. He asked Elizabeth to draw herself on September 22nd, the day before her predicted death. She drew herself in bed, sleeping peacefully. He asked her to draw September 24th, the day after. She sat motionless for several minutes, then said simply, "I can't see September 24th. There's nothing there. It's just dark." Professor Harrington's report to the Society for Psychical Research, dated August 15, 1891, concluded, "Elizabeth Crane does not merely predict future events. She appears to possess actual memories of the future, experiencing coming events as if they have already occurred. Most remarkably, her ability to perceive future events ceases abruptly after September 23, 1891. She cannot see, draw, or describe anything beyond that date. This suggests not a general prophetic ability, but a specific awareness of her own timeline ending. I have no scientific framework to explain this phenomenon, but I am convinced it is genuine." On August 20th, during one of Professor Harrington's sessions, Elizabeth suddenly became agitated. "Mrs. Patterson," she said urgently. "Mrs. Patterson from Church Street. She's going to die. Not today, but soon. Her funeral will be September 23rd at 2 o'clock. That's why Sarah will go to the church. That's why I'll be alone at the harbor." Mrs. Dorothy Patterson was a healthy woman of 57, known to the Crane family through church attendance. There was no indication of illness or impending death. Professor Harrington documented Elizabeth's statement with 8 witnesses present, including Dr. Blackwood and Reverend Morton. On August 27th, Mrs. Patterson complained of chest pains. On August 29th, she suffered a severe heart attack. Dr. Blackwood attended her, but could do nothing. She died on August 31st. Her funeral was scheduled for September 23rd at 2 o'clock at St. Mary's Church, exactly as Elizabeth had predicted 3 weeks earlier. The community's reaction shifted dramatically. What had been curiosity became fear. Elizabeth had predicted not just random events, but the death of a specific person, and her prediction had come true with perfect accuracy. Some townspeople began avoiding the Crane family, as if Elizabeth's presence might bring misfortune. Others sought her out, asking if she saw their futures. Elizabeth refused all requests. "I only see what comes to me," she told Mrs. Weatherby on September 5th. "I don't control it. I wish I didn't see anything at all. I wish I could change what I've seen, but I don't think I can. What I draw always happens." Always. Sarah Crane's diary entry from September 7th captures the family's anguish. "My sister knows the day and manner of her death. We are helpless to prevent it." On September 10th, Inspector Harold Whitfield of the Yorkshire Constabulary arrived with orders from the Home Office to investigate the Crane case. The government had taken notice following Professor Harrington's report, concerned about both the phenomenon itself and potential public disorder. Inspector Whitfield proposed taking Elizabeth into protective custody, arguing that if her death could be prevented through supervision, it would prove the predictions were not inevitable. Thomas Crane refused. "She is my daughter, not a subject for your experiments. If her time is coming, she will spend it with her family, not locked in some government facility." The Whitby community supported the Cranes. Reverend Morton, Dr. Blackwood, and 31 prominent citizens signed a petition blocking Elizabeth's removal. Inspector Whitfield relented, but assigned 2 constables to monitor the Crane home and the harbor area. Inspector Whitfield's classified report to the Home Office, declassified in 1984, recommended, "The phenomenon appears genuine. Multiple verified predictions, witnessed by credible observers, documented by respected medical professionals."
recommend preventing the child's access to the harbor on September 23rd. If the prediction can be thwarted through intervention, it will prove that future events are not fixed. If the prediction occurs despite intervention, it suggests a deterministic universe that science cannot currently explain. The Home Office authorized round-the-clock surveillance of Elizabeth Crane. Guards were posted at the harbor. The Crane family was instructed to keep Elizabeth home on September 23rd. Every precaution was taken. But as September approached, Elizabeth remained calm, as if she knew that what she had seen could not be prevented. September 23, 1891, dawned gray and cold, exactly as Elizabeth had predicted. Rain fell in the morning. By afternoon, the skies cleared. At 1:45 p.m., Sarah Crane prepared to attend Mrs. Patterson's funeral at St. Mary's Church. Thomas and William were at the shipyard, working despite the solemnity of the day. Sarah hesitated at the door. "Elizabeth, promise me you'll stay inside. Promise me you won't go to the harbor." Elizabeth, sitting at the kitchen table with her drawing materials, looked at her sister with sad, knowing eyes. "I promise I'll try, Sarah." At 2:00 p.m., the funeral began. The 2 constables assigned to watch the Crane home were also attending, as most of Whitby had turned out to pay respects. At 2:17 p.m., Elizabeth stood, put on her checked dress, the one Sarah had altered for her, and walked out the door. Later testimony from harbor workers placed Elizabeth at the eastern dock at approximately 2:35 p.m. The Mary Catherine was moored exactly where she had drawn it. The tide was high. Elizabeth stood at the precise spot she had sketched 6 months earlier, looking out at the gray water. Fisherman James Weatherby saw her first. "Miss Elizabeth," he called, "you shouldn't be here alone." He began walking toward her, but he was 50 yards away. What happened next was witnessed by 4 people from different vantage points. Elizabeth stood at the pier's edge, her drawing materials in her hand. A sudden gust of wind, or perhaps something else, caused her to lean forward. Her arms went out exactly as she had drawn. She fell. The water was dark and cold. Elizabeth could not swim. Weatherby dove in immediately, but the tide was pulling her under. By the time he reached the spot where she had fallen, Elizabeth Crane had disappeared beneath the surface. They recovered her body 17 minutes later. Dr. Blackwood pronounced her dead at 3:04 p.m. She was 8 years old. The inquest into Elizabeth Crane's death, held on September 27, 1891, concluded death by accidental drowning. But the testimony revealed something more complex. 4 witnesses confirmed Elizabeth had walked to the harbor deliberately, as if fulfilling an appointment. The constables admitted they had left their posts to attend the funeral. The timing, location, and circumstances matched Elizabeth's drawing with absolute precision. Professor Harrington conducted a final examination of Elizabeth's drawings and predictions. His report, submitted to the Society for Psychical Research on October 15th, attempted explanation while acknowledging its limits. Elizabeth Crane possessed what might be termed closed precognition, the ability to perceive future events within a fixed timeline that included her own death. She could see events up to September 23rd with remarkable clarity, but nothing beyond. This suggests she was not viewing multiple possible futures, but rather a single, determined future that could not be altered. He continued, "We attempted to prevent the predicted event through surveillance and family supervision, yet Elizabeth found herself at the harbor at the exact time and place she had foreseen. This raises profound questions about free will and determinism. Did Elizabeth walk to the harbor because she chose to, or because her future self's memory compelled her to fulfill what she had already seen? We documented the impossible, but we cannot explain the mechanism." Dr. Blackwood's final journal entry on the case, dated October 20th, acknowledged the mystery's persistence. "A child drew her own death 6 months before it occurred, with perfect accuracy in every detail. She predicted other events that came true exactly as she depicted them. We verified her abilities through rigorous testing, yet we could not save her. Perhaps some futures cannot be changed. Perhaps Elizabeth Crane saw a fixed point in time that no intervention could alter. In 1984, when the Home Office files were declassified, researchers gained access to the complete Crane documentation. In 2003, Dr. Michael Chen, a neuroscientist at Oxford University specializing in temporal perception and consciousness, conducted a comprehensive analysis using modern understanding of quantum mechanics and neuroscience. His findings, published in the Journal of Consciousness Studies in 2006, provided validation the Victorian investigators could never achieve. Dr. Chen examined preserved samples of Elizabeth's drawings using modern forensic techniques. Chemical analysis of the paper and ink confirmed they were created on the dates claimed. Comparison with known examples of 8-year-old children's artwork showed Elizabeth's prophetic drawings demonstrated spatial reasoning and detail retention far beyond normal developmental capacity. Most remarkably, Dr. Chen's team discovered something in Elizabeth's final drawing, the one depicting her death, that Victorian observers had missed. Using digital enhancement, they found faint pencil marks beneath the finished drawing, showing Elizabeth had initially drawn herself being pulled from the water alive. She had erased this version and redrawn herself drowning, as if correcting her own work to match what she knew would actually happen. Dr. Chen concluded, "The Crane case represents the most thoroughly documented instance of precognitive ability in medical literature. Modern quantum physics suggests time may not be as linear as we perceive it. Elizabeth Crane may have experienced what physicist John Wheeler termed retrocausality, the ability to receive information from future states. The Victorian documentation is sufficiently rigorous to confirm the phenomenon was genuine. The mystery of how it occurred remains unsolved. The Crane case is not unique in Victorian medical literature. In 1878, 12-year-old Anna Hoffmann of Vienna drew detailed sketches of a train derailment 3 weeks before it occurred, documented by physicians at Vienna General Hospital. In 1899, 7-year-old Robert Thorne of Edinburgh predicted a fire that killed his entire family, surviving only because his drawings convinced his grandmother to take him away for the night. In 1903, 9-year-old Marie Duchamp of Paris created a series of paintings depicting World War I battles, 15 years before the war began. These cases, documented by medical professionals and investigated by scientists, suggest that human consciousness may have capabilities we do not understand. They raise profound questions about the nature of time, free will, and whether the future already exists in some form that certain individuals can perceive. The Crane case, with its rigorous documentation and multiple verified predictions, stands as perhaps the strongest evidence that some children may genuinely perceive future events with accuracy that defies conventional explanation. Sarah Crane never married, living until 1947 and dying at age 75. She kept Elizabeth's drawings in a locked box, showing them only to researchers who approached with proper credentials and respectful intentions. In a letter written in 1940 to Professor Harrington's daughter, Sarah reflected on her sister's short life. Elizabeth knew she would die young, yet she remained gentle and kind until the end. She did not rage against her fate or sink into despair. She simply lived each day with quiet grace, drawing beauty from the world while knowing her time was limited. I have spent 50 years wondering if we could have saved her, if we had tried harder to keep her from the harbor, but I believe now that she was right. What she saw could not be changed. She walked to the harbor because that was always going to happen. She fulfilled her own prophecy because the future she saw was the only future that could exist. Elizabeth Crane is buried in St. Mary's Churchyard, overlooking the harbor where she died. Her gravestone reads simply, Elizabeth Mary Crane, 1882-1891. She saw what was coming. Elizabeth Crane proved that a child could perceive future events with perfect accuracy, that the future might be as real and observable as the past, that time might not flow in only one direction.
She drew her own death 6 months before it occurred, and despite every effort to prevent it, her vision came true exactly as she had depicted. What does this mean for our understanding of time and fate? If the future can be seen, is it already written? If this story challenges your understanding of time, destiny, and the limits of human perception, subscribe to our channel for more documented cases that question the nature of reality itself. Because Elizabeth Crane's story asks a question we still cannot answer. Is the future already decided, or can we change what we see coming?